Show. Okay, good morning, everybody. This is Deborah Rattler. Thank you all for being here on the 34th National Learning Community. Today, we have a really awesome presentation lined up for you. The focus of this National Learning Community today is going to be on Postvention. And we really have a dynamic team from Montana that is going to be really working, providing you some information on how they are approaching Postvention. Before we get started today, I would like to know if there's anybody in our audience or anyone that would like to say a few words to open us up, a short prayer, or just anything here to kind of get us started here this morning. Any volunteers? Well, I think we will just go ahead and get started. Again, I'd like to welcome everybody here today. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about, the Lewis and Clark County LOSS team. This is the first LOSS team in Montana. And you're going to hear in a few minutes what LOSS stands for. So I think at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Jess Hagelstrom and Linda Kinsey. And I'm going to let them take it away and do the presentation. So thank you, Jess and Linda. Okay.
Thank you, Deborah. Could we please go to slide 1 to get started?
Oh my God. Here we go.
All righty. Okay. So my name is Jess Hegstrom. I'm the Suicide Prevention Coordinator at Lewis and Clark Public Health, which is a city-county public health department in Helena, Montana. And I am joined by Linda Kinsey. Linda, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Linda Kinsey, and I'm the director of the Native Connections Grant here at Helena Indian Alliance. We are a cohort 6 Native Connections grantee, and I'm from Fort Belknap, Montana, and I'm an enrolled member of the Ahani or Grovant tribe. I been in Helena here for about 8.5 years, and very, very grateful to be able to do this work here in Helena. Thank you.
Can you go ahead and advance to the next slide, please? So just a little bit more about us. Under my position at Lewis and Clark Public Health, which is funded by a SAMHSA grant, by the way, not the Native Connections Grant, but the Mental Health Awareness Training Grant. So we are friends in grants, among other things. So we were able to, through the auspices of the grant, but also additional funding, to start this program called LOSS Team, which Linda has been part of the leadership team and a member of this since pretty much it started back last April of 2022, but there was a lot of work that went into it prior to that. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. But Linda, do you want to say anything a little bit more about your experience before we move forward?
Maybe a little bit later, Jess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about LOSS Team. If we could go to the next slide, please. Oh, before we do that, we're going to talk about suicide language. So we always talk about language around suicide. This is all probably information you all are very well aware of, but I always throw it in every presentation just to make sure we're all on the same page about the language that we use around suicide. So we know that there's a word that folks have been using for a very long time, and that is the commit word. So the problem with the word commit is that it also conveys a sense of sin and criminality when we use it. Someone committed burglary, someone committed murder, someone committed adultery, someone committed some other thing, right? So when we say that, it always has a negative connotation attached. Now, we're not saying that we want to we're not pro-suicide. We're not saying yay suicide, but by using the word commit, we're saying that it is sin and criminal when it is not criminalized in Montana anymore. And we want to help people realize that a lot of times this has something to do with a mental health challenge that's not necessarily properly treated. Someone is so overwhelmed that their coping mechanisms just aren't doing what they need to do. So we really try to just talk about suicide in plain language. Someone died by suicide, someone attempted suicide, someone thought about suicide, someone experienced suicidal ideation. Another one is the term success or unsuccessful. We don't want any person who is thinking about suicide and then makes an attempt and survives to think this is another thing that I have failed at. There is no success when it comes to suicide. So again, we just talk about it in plain language. Someone attempted suicide, someone thought about suicide, things like that. We don't want to add another element of judgment to what is already just an incredibly complex issue, which you all, I'm sure, are very, very well aware. So that's just wanted to touch on that. Linda, anything you want to add before we push into the slides more?
I think we're going to talk about maybe not with the lost team for Postvention, but maybe too, but certainly not to be afraid when you're doing advocacy work or support work around suicide is when we talk about it with somebody that might be at risk is don't be afraid to ask them if they're suicidal. I just kind of thought about that when we're talking about prevention.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
It is always okay to ask. Thank you for that, Linda. Yeah, absolutely.
Jess, before you move on, Jess, we have a hand up from Carrie Dallas. Carrie, you want to come on unmute?
Thank you. I just signed on just like as you're finishing this slide. I'm sorry, I apologize.
No problem.
I've always been very, I've been continuing to hear, say the right words when you're talking to young people. And then I live on the res. And so, the culture really, really is something to consider too when we're talking about it, because it's taboos and stuff. And I heard you say to use the words attempted suicide, thought about suicide. What do we say? I mean, here you say avoid commit.
Yeah. So Carrie, what I would say is they took their life. They died by suicide. We just don't want to going back to that notion of plain language, they died. No one commits cancer. They just died by died from cancer.
Okay.
So just trying to keep it really clean, away from any of those judgment words. Thank you for asking that, because obviously I didn't specify.
So again, by living out here, I think that even when you say died by suicide, it really is harmful, not just to the individual, but as well as the network of family relations, both blood and any other maybe adopted or clan type of relationship, that it will impact the ones that are left if we say died by suicide.
What would you suggest instead, Carrie?
Well, it's interesting. It's a two-sided blade because they want to know what happened. They usually do. That's where I've been I've been really looking and searching for guidance, because I feel that two-edged sword, I feel it. Like, how do you avoid saying those things because you've seen it, how it impacts the ones before? So how do you say it, but yet they're still wanting to know what happened? Did they have cancer, or, and so, especially when it means that they need to have ceremony or something. What are they needing to have ceremony against or for? So it's really two-sided sword. Do you say it, or do you do it in confidential manner? And that's kind of the way I've been choosing to do it, is by one-on-one in confidential manner, or asking that maybe the mother or the partner to be, I say, maybe it's for the family to talk about with you.
Okay. Do you mind if I jump in really fast?
I'm done. Thank you. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. So here are my thoughts about that. Each community is different. Each tribal community is different. So I would go with what is most appropriate. But what I
Mhm.
know is that when we don't talk about suicide, like obviously we want to make sure that a family knows before we tell anybody else, right? But when we talk about suicide, we need to talk about it out in the open. And this is again my experience, because we've gone so long not talking about it that it hasn't done any good. And so, with each individual family, we're not about to out a family that's just had a loss, but we do tell them, like when they're talking with their youth, to be honest and to say what happened to the kids in a way that is developmentally appropriate, because they're going to hear about it on the schoolyard, and we know that that's not always going to be so kind. And so if families can control the narrative, then they have more power. And if they are able to talk about these things openly, they're more likely to seek help. But again, this is only what I have seen, but I'm a big proponent in being open and vulnerable about these things, because it allows other people to share what they're going through too. And I did lose a loved one to suicide, and so I found that not talking about it did not help my family. But then again, that's my own experience.
Can I say something?
Please.
Mhm.
First of all, I would like to ask, how many are you guys advocates? Are you out there or are you behind a desk doing this, suicide?
Most of us are people who've lost a loved one to suicide and behavioral health professionals. So as we get into the into the slideshow, we can talk a lot more about it. But a
Okay.
model that we're discussing involves people who have specifically lost loved ones to suicide. So it is an informal
Yeah,
model.
because that is a big difference right there. What you guys are doing today, and like I'm an advocate, I go right to them, and it's a big difference. What she's saying, Jess is saying, is absolutely right. You get right down to the point. You don't beat around the bush about it, because you're gonna go in and you're gonna train QPR, right?
Yeah.
And you're gonna train assist. All this comes with you ask straight out and you have them say it in the training.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is two, it's different.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for that. So let's go ahead and continue through the slides and see if we have other thoughts about the model and about the language, if that works. So what is a LOS team? So a LOS team stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors Team. So it involves teams going to the scene of confirmed suicides following notification from law enforcement or the coroner's office. So this is the model in general. It's made up of community members who've lost a loved one to suicide, and then behavioral health professionals. So those are the team members. I serve on the team, so does Linda. Yep, thank you for that, Sarah. Yeah, absolutely. So it is not a model that we created, but we think it's a really interesting model and helpful for different types of communities, because what we've learned about LOS teams is that they're like individual snowflakes. They are built on the strengths and resources and people that make up each individual community. Each LOS team, while they bear similarities, are different. And so that's what we really liked about it in terms of bringing it to Montana, but we'll get into that in a moment. What we really love about LOS teams is that it brings that informal peer support that Hannah just helped point out. I've lost someone too. You're not alone. There are other people in the community here that are here to put their arms around you. It's hope for life after loss. You aren't always going to feel the way that you do right now. And one of the fastest ways to get you through into feeling differently is by getting you connected to resources as quickly as possible to help you stabilize, process, and eventually grow, because we know that post-traumatic growth is something that we can achieve after losing people that we care about to suicide. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, unless Linda, you want to add anything?
Oh, good.
Okay, just pop in. Please feel free. I just talk if left to my own devices. So Lost Teams started in 1999 by a gentleman, Dr. Frank Campbell. He is a former president of the American Association of Suicidology, and he has a clinic in Louisiana. And what he was finding is that he had suicide loss survivors that were taking a very, very long time to come in, and that a number of them were also taking their lives. And he knew there was a problem there. So when Dr. Campbell speaks, he talks about everything in metaphors, and he likes to refer to lost teams as lighthouses. So lighthouses don't exist for calm waters and sunny days, right? They're there to help guide ships into port when it's stormy and rocky. And so that's really what we are trying to do. We're trying to shed a light on the path forward for our new survivors, because they're in a storm right now. It is evidence-based for connecting and engaging survivors to support services quickly. What we know is it usually takes over 4.5 years for your average suicide loss survivor to get connected to services, to start talking about these things, to start working through how they feel about their loved one, their loss. And so with the model, it cuts it down to 39 days. And we think that's just pretty amazing. And one of the primary reasons we said, yes, this is something that needs to come to Montana. There are 40 teams across the US and several international locations. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So why is this important? We know that suicide loss is traumatic. And as I mentioned, I've lost loved ones to suicide. Linda has lost loved ones to suicide. This is not something that we're just doing just because we thought it would be good for the community. It's also something that has touched our own lives. What we find with that loss is that there's the intense emotional pain and shock. Why? Why did this happen? Everyone wants to know why. And the answer is always, it's complicated. A lot of whirlwind of emotions, anger, shame, grief, confusion, hopelessness, a lot of self-blame. That was something my family definitely dealt with. Denial. Absolutely happy to share the slides, Carrie. Then sometimes a sense of relief. For my dad, he had bipolar 1 and struggled with suicidality my entire childhood. And so when he did finally pass away from suicide, there was a sense of relief, which of course made us feel more guilt and shame. And so it also brings up questions. What does this say about me and my family? Sometimes there's so much pain that we want to join the loved one that we lost. There can be concerns about burial rights, sin and afterlife for the loved one who passed. What happens to them now? Sometimes the family can be shunned by their church or religion. Friends don't know how to help. They don't know what to say. A lot of times they get frozen. And then there's so much stigma about why it happened, who we are. I can say for my mom, who is a school teacher, she had a colleague who lost a loved one to suicide as well as her husband, and staff members started saying, what did that terrible woman do to that man? And so my mom did not tell anyone that my dad died by suicide. She told him that he died from a stroke. And I still have family members who believe that to be true, when it just prevented us from talking about these things and getting the help that we needed. And then Tony, if you could go ahead and click once more, there is one more bullet on this page. And that's the other thing, is support can be hard to find. If you're a suicide loss survivor, you don't necessarily know what's available to you. Hopefully you have, you do some sort of search, you look in the yellow pages, look at Google, but what if there's not anything listed? Luckily, we do have access to 211 as well. That lists a lot more services, but if you don't know it exists and you are overwhelmed by the loss, by the pain, it's probably not something you're looking for. So we need to make sure that survivors have access to care. Let's go ahead and do the next slide, please. So why loss teams matter, survivors need extra support because of the many reasons that I already mentioned. They often don't get the help that they need, and they can get stuck in the early, most painful stages of grief. So, you know, when we talk about grief, sometimes we talk about like different stages, you know, denial and acceptance. And I don't know all of them, to be honest, but what I do know is that with complex grief, we can, as suicide loss survivors, we're more likely to get stuck in those first few phases and not necessarily come out of them for a long time. And so what we find is a lot of people, when they're hurting, and this is a very human thing that human beings do, is when we're hurting, we find ways to kill the pain. And so we end up finding that a lot of people will take on maladaptive behaviors like substance use or hoarding or other unhealthy behaviors to cope. It's something that human beings do. We also know that if you've been exposed in this way, that you're at a 3 times increased risk of making a suicide attempt. And that certainly has been my journey. Linda, anything you want to add?
But I'll share about my experiences later on, but you know, we do as a advocates or responders to the loss team, when we get a call and we're on our shift, many times it is a delayed response, you know, like and sometimes that's favorable for the person who's not ready right away, you know, right following the loss of a loved one, or it could be an immediate response the day of or the day after. But I think later on we'll kind of get more into how it looks as a person who's responding to help survivors of suicide loss.
Thank you for that. Let's go to the next slide, please. So postvention is prevention. So that is a phrase from Dr. Ed Schneidman, who is considered, I believe, the father of postvention. But what we're, you know, you all have heard this term before, but what we're referring to is an organized response in the aftermath of a suicide to facilitate healing associated with grief and distress of suicide loss. So we're trying to reduce the likelihood of suicide contagion, something we certainly see, especially with youth. But I track all of the suicide losses that happen in our county, and I have been since about tracking since 2016, although I haven't been in the position that long. So what we find is a lot of times when we lose one family member, there's an increased likelihood we'll lose another family member. We want to mitigate the impact of loss, and we want to facilitate healing. There is certainly hope for life after loss, but how do we connect our survivors to that? But what we know about most postvention services that are available to people in Montana is that they, well, really anywhere, is that they have to be aware that they exist. So that's why Dr. Frank Campbell created this model, is he wanted to remove that stumble effect. You know, we don't want it to have to be that you run into the right resource fair or you run into the right survivor who's a little further along than you are to get connected to services. We also know that a lot of times the way people get connected to those different services is through, you know, like a hospital setting. But with suicide, unless the person did not immediately die from their attempt, we're often not going to be interfacing with the hospital. And so how do we make sure that there's no way that our survivors can go very long without getting access to something? So that's why this program does drop it down from 4.5 years to 39 days for your average survivor to get connected to services. We're making sure they know what is available to them from the get-go. Next slide, please. So Loss Team of Lewis and Clark County area is the official name of our loss team. It is the first in Montana. It is the subgroup, a subgroup of the Lewis and Clark Suicide Prevention Coalition, which I oversee. And that coalition also does work around lethal means, a lot of education, that sort of thing. We are funded by an annual grant from our Department of Public Health and Human Services called HB 118. We just applied for another one just recently and are crossing fingers and toes. We have a really just crucial partnership with the Lewis and Clark County Sheriff's Office Coroner's Division, which notifies the team of a confirmed suicide. They've been amazing and really do see that the work that we're doing is a way to further their own services, because they do a lot for families after a loss, but there is a certain point where they need to be able to move on to the next case. And so we are able to help provide more consistent care after the fact. And we'll talk about what that looks like as we go through. We have a leadership group of key stakeholders, which Linda is a part. We have a consultant who is assisting with training and has helped keep us on the rails for while we've been planning this program, and make sure that it is available to the community. She's located in California, but just came out for our last training, and now we're going to start working on training folks ourselves. We fully launched out our services on April 9th, so we're just a little bit over a year old. And then our goal, in addition to continuing to offer services to our community, is to inspire more teams across the state, because we really believe that if we can create a network of support that is throughout our state, our survivors are going to get better services. So Linda and I are in Helena, but if someone passed away in the community of Great Falls, which is what, like an hour away, Linda? How far away is Great Falls? Yeah.
About an hour and a half, yeah.
About an hour and a half. We want to make sure that people, so if their loss happened in Helena, but they're located in Great Falls, we want to make sure that they get services too, instead of just an email that says, hey, here are the survivor support groups that we're aware of. So we really want to see this model grow in our community, and we just, in our statewide community, I should say. And so that is really a place that we want to go. We want to see it build. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and watch a quick video about the lost team that Tony is going to share for us.
Hello, my name is Leo Button, Sheriff Coroner in Lewis and Clark County, and I want to talk to you about a program we have here in Lewis and Clark County called a Lost Team. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We appreciate it. We want to enhance the quality of life of citizens in Lewis and Clark County. We believe that the Lost Team can help us do that.
My name is Jess Hegstrom, and I am one of many organizers for the Lost Team of Lewis and Clark County area. And I'm also a survivor, and I volunteer with this team because I think it's just so important for our community. The Lost Team is a model that came out of Louisiana in 1998, and we first learned about it while participating in a national call with a funder. And we learned of other communities that have this really awesome model in which former suicide loss survivors and behavioral health professionals go and support families right after a suicide loss. And this is really important to me personally because I'm a suicide loss survivor, and I often think how helpful it would have been if at the beginning of my grief journey I had received services like we are now able to offer to our community. It's just really important that we give our suicide loss survivors every opportunity to heal, and that's what we do, and we do it together.
If you feel that the Lost Team should be dispatched, make sure and let the coroner's office know. They're the ones that can notify them. There will be a team of 2 that show up and counsel those that are the survivors. They will not get in the way of any investigation. They're there to support and help.
My name is Cody Kreiner. I'm a deputy coroner with the Lewis Clark County Coroner's Division. We are partnered up with the Lost Team. The Lost Team is an asset to us and the community. We can contact them to put the families who have lost a loved one through suicide and get them the resources they need to go through this tragic event in their life, because it is such a delicate moment in their lives. So one of the special things about the Lost Team volunteers is a lot of them are survivors themselves, which is, I think, great because the families have someone to relate to at that time.
We are here simply to support the family. The goal of Lost Team is really about giving families hope after loss, and that's for the survivors who serve as well. One thing that we have found is that survivors who serve on Lost Team also find more healing because they're helping others. And we are turning pain and grief into hope and action.
My name is Allie Mullen, and my relation to the Lost Team is that I'm a volunteer and I'm also a suicide loss survivor. It was about a year after my husband had passed away. And from the second that I heard about it, I knew I wanted to be a part of that, to be someone else's connection in their darkest moment, to help them find those resources as quickly as possible, because I know other people who are as far out as I am, and some of them are still really struggling. We keep doing this work and we keep trying to heal in our grief, and that's helped a lot with where I am today.
Through counseling, through listening to other people's stories, you'll find solace and you'll find rest. That's the important part of this program. And what I want to tell you is there's hope. So please reach out and use this program. Thank you for your support.
Please feel free to call me at 406-457-8970. We really are here to serve as a resource to the community and to make sure that Lewis and Clark County is a place where our survivors heal.
I would like to personally, from a survivor standpoint, thank the Sheriff's Department and all of the first responders for embracing this program and giving us the opportunity to go in and help families after their loss. It means so much to me, and I know it means a lot to all the other survivors and the community that we're building. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Tony. Let's go ahead and advance to the next slide. There's a weird black bar at the top. I don't know if that's just my computer, what's going on there. Oh, there's weird stuff happening.
It's Tony, it's the box Tony is using, I think, on his computer.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and continue. So as Linda mentioned, and as was depicted in the video, we do on-scene and delayed responses. So if the coroner calls us to show up immediately, we do. If the family says, we want to talk to you guys, but we need a couple of days, we do that as well. And honestly, about 98% of our calls are delayed. So on-scene is usually more about how do we stabilize? How do we bring a friend to the scene who can help deal with the logistics while the family is in shock? Can someone make sure that the kids are picked up from school? Are there animals that need to be cared for? Do we need keys to a car? What does someone need to make phone calls to other family members? Can someone who's maybe a little bit less in shock take care of some of those things? So we're doing that. We also give everybody who needs one a bag of materials with books that are appropriate for their type of loss, that connect them to our local suicide bereavement support groups. If they're a military connected family, getting them connected to things like the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, which we'll talk about. With the delayed response, we're giving them all of those same materials, but we're having more of a conversation about what happened? What is the most painful part for you? How have you been doing? Have you been sleeping? That sort of thing. What else would you say there, Linda?
Oh, well, I've been both a responder for a delayed response, on-scene response, and I can say in both of those situations that it's been very valuable for our presence. Sometimes we don't know what the right words are to say, but both of those responses were really appreciated, us being present. And, like it says, it's two, we go in teams of two, a clinical person and a peer, and I go as a clinical person, but in the other sense, I'm also a peer, being having a suicide loss in my own circle in my own family. And so that presence is really, I think, sometimes undervalued in certain maybe environments, but I can, from my experiences, our presence was very, very appreciated, and both for us being there and being able to provide that support, and also have some healing of our own. And but the survivors certainly appreciated our presence, just helping them to feel stronger and braver. And the one of the it was just the day after the suicide loss, she hadn't told her children yet, and so we didn't really know that she hadn't told her children yet. So she waited till the team got there, and before her children were brought into the room, she asked if it was okay that we can stay and support her and provide that presence while she told her children of the loss. And so it's just really things like that are very, it seems like a small thing, but it really isn't. And so I think it's a win-win situation for not only the lost team, but also for sure the family. So
Absolutely agree. Yeah. And we know that survivor was able to tell her kiddos, and now those kiddos are able to get connected to services and be able to start working through it and have a really healthy perspective about what that loss looked like as they grow. So what other things to mention is survivors who haven't received assistance can call to request a visit. The phone number that was in the video is not our actual hotline. That's if you just want to get resources for me or want to schedule an extra visit or whatever it is you need. We have a very special hotline that only the coroner's office knows. I don't even know it by heart, to be honest. But we're happy to assist survivors wherever they are in their journey. Because again, we know that there are survivors who are a year out, like, one of the volunteers who spoke in the video, Allie, her loss wasn't that long ago, but she's doing really well because she got connected to care. And then I know survivors who are 20 years out and are still really, really struggling. And that was certainly the case for my family. It took 17 and a half years for us to address the loss and really be able to start working through it and understand and have a chance to heal. And so we want to give that gift to our other survivors wherever they are in their journey. And then what we're able to do is connect them to services through a program called the Connect Referral System that's available in Montana. It's a provider to provider referral system online. And then we also do follow-up calls. So it's not just a one and done. After we visit the family, as long as they are willing to receive calls, my cats are fighting, stop it. Like the worst time for them to fight is when I'm doing a presentation. Sorry about that, but we have people who call called the follow-up team, and they call out 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year. They also, the families get a condolence card and a 1 year anniversary card. And what those calls are there to do is to show, hey, you are not alone. We're still in your corner. We're assessing for suicidality. If there's something that sounds really off, we can connect them to the clinician who is on duty at any given time. We're always there to connect them to services. You might not be ready right off the bat to be connected to a therapist. You might not be ready for 6 months, but we want to meet you where you are at when you are ready to do that. And one of the things that we can offer, and we can't do this for our longer term survivors, but we can for any of the new survivors, is we can connect them to 2 free sessions with a grief counselor via a partnership with a local nonprofit. So the nonprofit pays for them to get 2 free sessions and then reimburses local therapists. It's like either $80 or $85 for each of those 2 emergency sessions. And then hopefully if the family has access to other services, maybe they have insurance, maybe they have an employee assistance program, that can be additional sessions. If they're military connected, that can be the tragedy assistance program for survivors. Which again, I'll talk about as we get further along. That could also be through like a vet center. They will give additional sessions. So how can we piece together additional care? But with those 2 free sessions, it's not everything, but it is feet on the path. It is moving forward and starting to give space for people to work on their recovery. And then, as I mentioned, we do resource materials, including activity for books for youth to understand suicide grief, because it's a very own special ball of wax. And so we have have an activity book from the Dougie Center, which is very well regarded, that we give to kiddos if they are, either they're on the scene, or if there's family members say, hey, I've got some kids that aren't here that need some care, or their grandkid. We want to make sure that everyone comes at this from, the most healthy perspective possible. Can we go ahead and go to the next slide, please? And just FYI, we use the lantern rather than a lighthouse because there's just not a lot of lighthouses in a landlocked state in Montana. So on-scene delayed visits, I believe this is your slide, Linda.
Like I mentioned, I've done on-scene, delayed, and phone visits and follow-up and resources, and I just was thinking about the one that was not what was a delayed visit. I believe the loss had happened almost a year prior, not quite a year prior, and she had received calls and support from the loss team. She was one of I believe one of our first ones when we first started last year, and she wasn't interested. She wasn't ready. She didn't think that she wanted support or needed support. And I'm not sure if the follow-up team had contacted her again, or that she found the information of the loss team. So she did decide that she wanted a visit. And so we went out in a team of 2. Like I said, I was the clinical responder, and our other Janelle was the peer support. And it was just really, she's the one that I believe really appreciated our visit and the presence. And we didn't go technically line by line or book by book with the materials in the bag. We just, answered her questions, listened to her. She had a lot to share about her husband who had died by suicide in the home. We were in the home that, and she was just really, and she didn't want us to leave. She was like, we were there well over an hour, and we were adamant, and we were very promising that we would return. And so that was one that was a delayed visit. And then the important thing I think following was the debriefing between the team, because this is heavy stuff, going on scene. And so we debriefed for a time, and the advocate shared with me some of her I don't know if I want to say the word triggers, but some of her feelings towards our visit there and what it evoked in her. And I also shared with her. So I think that self-care part and that debriefing part is really important, so that we could continue to help people by helping ourselves as well. So, and then just the part of, it isn't therapy. I'm a retired therapist, and I have to keep reminding myself that this is not therapy per se, but however, we do have resources to refer the individuals to therapy should they choose to. And so we always arrive together. The clinical partner will take the lead, and because the coroner call comes to that person who's on the phone on that shift. And so, we make arrangements where we're going to meet, talk prior about it, or just meet at the address that we're given. And then warm handoff from family to deputy to coroner is really kind of, Jess is kind of the lead on that in the experiences I've had with it, from the coroner correspondence to the information on how to get there, the logistics and things. So yeah.
And we have a brochure that we give them. Usually, since so many of our calls are delayed, usually the coroner is long gone by the time we get to the family. So that brochure at least gives them an idea of what to expect. And honestly, if we never see the family, at least they're getting some basic information. They have this one thing that talks to them about, hey, however you come at this, as long as you find a healthy way to heal, it's probably okay. So yeah, and the point about this isn't therapy, there's nothing that we're going to say that's going to take away their pain, but we're planting seeds of hope. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And Linda already talked a little bit about debriefing. Did you want to talk about this one too, or do you want me to?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so as Linda said, strict buddy system, we don't let folks go over by themselves. If you want to, like, one, you wouldn't generally know, well, how do I put this? You may know that there's a survivor in the community. There might have just been a loss, but if you're going to do, if you want to help through loss team, we do it together. And so we're always very strict about making sure we have 2 people going over. That supports the volunteers, that also supports the survivors. We debrief after, just as Linda talked about. Clinicians can support each other. We also do monthly dinner meetings for our volunteers because, you know, you could be on call for a long time and not ever go on scene, because for our county, we're averaging about 20 suicides annually, which is obviously too much, but that can get spread out over a year's time. So we have some volunteers on our team who have just never gone on call because they just weren't on call at the time that you know, when there was a loss. And so to make sure that our volunteers stay up to speed, don't feel like they're not doing anything, we have these monthly dinner meetings to debrief, to talk about those different experiences like Linda just was discussing. How do we work? If something like this comes up next time, how do we manage it? We do problem solving together. And then also we do some socials to make sure that people have an opportunity to become friends, because we know that we heal in togetherness and we're a tighter team if we're a team that cares about each other, and we just have that better opportunity to heal as well. We're also giving them opportunities for additional training, models that you all are probably pretty darn familiar with, but QPR, mental health first aid, youth mental health first aid, assist. We work with the Tamarack Grief Resource Center in Missoula. They've done some training for us, and we just attended their Grief Institute, which was held last week. So that was another opportunity for us to learn more about grief and suicide grief and how to be more supportive. And then we also are able to offer CEUs for our clinicians just to kind of sweeten the pot for them helping and volunteering with us. But what we found is that a lot of our clinical volunteers have been also touched by suicide and really just want to help.
Jess, hey, I got a quick question for you. Do you ever find that you have our requests from schools, or if there's been a group of youth suicides, that they call you in from an organization to come and help them move through that? Like schools sometimes need help moving through that whole process with the survivors, the youth survivors.
Sort of. So through our deliverables, we do contact any building associated with a suicide loss, whether that is, you know, person's job, or if the suicide occurred at a school, we are contacting them. So usually what happens is we'll hear about it through the coroner, and then we'll immediately start calling the schools. They now have one individual. It used to be each different school building. So they have one individual who's their grant manager who now helps with that. But one thing we've done a little work around is trying to coordinate postvention efforts. So they're still pretty loose, but we're like, this is what we have. But generally they have partnerships set up with organizations like Helena Indian Alliance, like Aware, Youth Dynamics, Shodair Children's Hospital, which is our psych hospital, things like that. And Linda, you might be able to speak to this more than I can. So there is work that happens on that front. We offer, and if they take us up on it, then we provide, but it's really up to the schools and what they think is best, because they each have their own separate little systems going on.
Yes, for the Helena Indian Alliance, which we are an urban Indian clinic, we do have about 6 to 8, anywhere from 6 to 8, and of which half are dual licensed clinicians. And so last year we did have a suicide at the local school on the across from the campus, in which some students witnessed. And so they did reach out because somehow or the other I was in touch with the School Counselors Association. I'm also a former school counselor. And I told them about our because the access to clinical care for mental health services for students here in Helena, at one time, it's getting better, was very hard. We had long waiting lists. We had, access to care wasn't very good for youth here in Helena. Since then, it's been a little bit better, and our clinic is now gonna, some of our therapists are now gonna be in the school, I think as of mid-May. So we've placed some clinicians. We've had some space where we could do, place some clinicians within the school, but typically the schools are wanting to take care of, prior to this suicide last year, wanting to take care of services within their own walls. But I believe they realized because of the lack of, immediate access is caused them to reach out to other resources here in Helena. So that's always a good thing, to reach out to others to help.
And what I can add is that particular school district had this big presentation about how they're going to be working more with the community to make sure that we're meeting students' mental health needs. And that's just very exciting for all of us. They're applying for grants and looking for more ways to communicate. So that's pretty cool. Also, the other thing is we do have a mobile crisis response team in town that also responds. So when that suicide occurred, they were immediately on scene, trying to stabilize, talk to kids, that sort of thing. So there are a number of different resources that can plug in there with us, because how do I put this? Because there might be an autopsy that needs to happen before they determine that a particular death is a suicide. We have to wait a little while, because we only respond if a suicide is confirmed, because we don't want to add confusion to anyone's tragedy. And so that means that there can be a little bit extra delay. So that's why we're really glad to have MCRT. But again, each loss team looks different for each community. There are some loss teams that only do delayed responses. So it's really about what works for you if you wanted to bring one to your community. Does that help answer the question? Sorry.
Mhm.
Thanks, Jess.
Okay. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we heal by helping others. We're really working on trying to turn grief and experience into hope and action. We've had this loss, and there's only so much you can do about your own loss. Obviously, you want to stabilize and work on your own grief and hopefully go into post-traumatic growth. But how do you get there? And so with this particular model, we really like that it attaches you to this sense of that post-traumatic growth. You're getting a sense of community. You're able to pay forward any help that was provided to you with your loss for others. And what we're finding is that a lot of people are experiencing unexpected healing and service to others. So for our consultant, she is a 3-time suicide loss survivor. She lost her mom to suicide when she was 10 years old. And so she said that when she has gone out on calls, she's had the opportunity to go on a call with where there was a young girl, and she was able to say some of the things that she wished that she had heard when she had her loss. And that in itself is healing. And so that is a way that we can address our losses in a different way and help others by shining the light on the path forward to healing. No one wants to be part of this club, but if we are, we can be supportive to each other and help each other heal and realize that there is no guilt and shame that needs to happen here. Togetherness is so much for human beings. Let's move forward. So community impact, since we rolled out on April 9th of 22, we have recruited 23 volunteers. A lot of them are clinicians. We have a smaller handful of survivors, but we've brought on a few more that we have to process because we have the whole volunteer process. We've responded to all county suicides and served 40 survivors. 15 of those, 37.5% consented to and received referrals to a therapist and a suicide bereavement support group. About another 37.5% immediately said they didn't want our services, and we think that has something to do with just lack of awareness. So we're building on our awareness in the community. And then other areas, Jefferson County, which is our neighboring county and has, gosh, maybe 13,000 people in it, indicate their undersheriff indicated that if we brought the model to their area that they would get behind it. And then we've been working with Rocky Boy Health Center, which has also approached their coroner about starting a team. And so we're going to be talking with them further tomorrow. It sounds like their coroner has some hesitations, but that's why we have other coroners talk to these coroners so that we can create a sense of comfort, because a lot of it has something to do with concerns about sharing personal information around HIPAA. But what we know is, like, one, we're very careful around next of kin information, incredibly careful. And if that's something anyone wants to know about, I can set separate time to discuss, because we don't need to go too much into how the sausage is made right now. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. So anyway, so we're really trying to make sure that other communities can bring this to their areas as well, because we'll be stronger together. Next slide, please. Linda, was this one that you were going to talk about, or did you want me to discuss this one?
I think I could say that collaboration between different programs, entities, facilities is really important. Like we mentioned before, I'm from the Urban Indian Health Center here in Helena Indian Alliance, the Native Connections Grant, and Jess is from the Lewis and Clark County Suicide Prevention Coalition. And we're probably logistically about, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes apart geographically, but you know, sometimes you have those silos, you know, even within buildings. And so it's really important, I think, to you know, communicate, to engage stakeholders in this cause that we're in, this cause of suicide prevention. We're in it together, and so the network of support is really critical. None of us could do it alone in our own families, communities, and certainly in our own programs. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And Jess was one of the first persons. Like I said, we're a cohort 6 Native Connections grant. And Jess was, I think, one of the first important stakeholders that we joined with when we first started our grant, and I first started this work. So, yeah.
And the other thing that's cool too is that loss teams wrangle the services that are available in our community. If you got something that can help survivors, we want to be able to share that with other people. So we're all stronger together, and we're mobilizing survivors, and we're mobilizing these different programs so that people have better access. Next slide, please. I think we're eating up our time. So there's just sort of an example of some of the different things that we're referring people to. There's an online support group that meets on the 1st and 3rd Fridays. There's also an in-person one that I don't have listed here. There's Tamarack Grief Resource Center, which does support groups and grief counseling and webinars and grief camps and all sorts of different things around grief. So we try to connect survivors to them. Healing Conversations, which is something available through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. It's a one-time opportunity in which a survivor is connected with someone with longer-term lived experience who can talk to them about that. So if you have like a mom who lost a kiddo, you have another mom talking to them. There's the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, which is for any type of loss of a loved one who's connected to the military, but they have information that is very special just for suicide loss survivors. And then, as I mentioned earlier, our Helena Vet Center offers 6 free sessions with a therapist if you're military connected. So those are ways to extend the availability of therapy sessions. Next slide, please. And then things to think about here. If you are interested in starting a team, the first few things to think about are talking to your coroner's office and law enforcement. Is this something that you might be interested in? And then building a stakeholder team. who should be at the table to see if this is feasible for your community. We brought together folks like hospice and funeral homes and local providers and any survivors we knew and people who ran support groups. So really mapping out who are those stakeholders, who are the people who would be able to figure out if this is the right fit and maybe serve on the team or be the leadership. And then identifying existing resources you can use to refer survivors. If you don't have any, that's the place to start, because really what Lost Team is ultimately it's referring people to services. That's really where it's evidence-based. The informal peer support, all the other things are important, but ultimately if we can't refer them to something, then we need to start there. So what is that? Is that support groups? Is that talking circles? Is that therapists with bereavement education? What does that look like for your individual community? Linda, anything you want to add here?
Oh, I think we covered it there. It's really important, again, to work together and not to feel alone in this work.
And what we learned when we started exploring it is that it's, like the phrase that everyone likes to use, it takes a village, but it's true. It really is a matter of many hands coming together to make this thing work in whatever way that looks for your unique community. Next slide, please.
I think Hannah lost connection. She was going to talk about, they are a cohort 4 or 5 grantee from Fort Belknap, the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation, North Central Montana. And she was going to talk about how they do postvention services there in a rural tribal environment. I think we're kind of running out of time. I could probably briefly speak towards that as well, because I also provided services on my home reservation there in Fort Belknap. But what's good about the Lost Team here in the urban environment is that it's an organized response. Many times our response on the reservation isn't organized, and we do not have the benefit of the confirmation from a coroner. Our coroner we do not have a tribal coroner. Our coroner is off the reservation in the county seat of Blaine County. And so that's a little bit different postvention response or postvention services in the rural tribal environment. But what I can say, one thing that is always used is very important is our cultural, our healing ways. And so, okay, Hannah's here. Maybe she could talk about that. And I was just going to mention sage. It's very, very important as a responder when I was responding to bring sage and certainly burn that smudge in that environment is for anybody that wants it. But I think Hannah is on.
Yeah, I'm here. Like I said, I'm traveling. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we could hear you. We were talking that you maybe want to speak towards postvention services a little bit there at Fort Belknap in the rural tribal community.
Yeah, we are a lot of ours. We have 4 districts here that we work with. So there's we collaborate a lot with the Twahi program. We use a lot of our cultural people, and we use a lot of schools. We go into the schools. That's the big source. First, we tried to get the QPR into all the schools, and with our cultural really close. And we get the preachers. They made a people call in that it's not culturally. So that was really a huge success for our people, especially our youth. Our youth is raised with culture, so they'd rather go to the church, which was totally cool, because that's the first thing I asked them. Going to we work with the Mother Earth a lot. We start our gardens, we start them in school. We work with life, you know, the life of the food that we have. So all work together with that. Okay. We go, I was just talking about how we have, you know,
Hannah, you're cutting in and out a little bit.
you're gonna get up and leave. So you always got am I going out? Am I there yet?
Yeah, you're here.
Oh, okay. I just want to say a quote that the youth, they say, don't start something and leave them. So you earn the trust there and you stay consistent on all your activities. And I always encourage the prayer at everything, even these meetings that you guys are doing now. I always like to see a prayer started out, and if you forget, that's okay, but you can always end with the prayer. So the prayers are real important, encouraged on these, especially this subject, the subject of suicide. So like I said, this is a big reservation, but we work with all four corners of it. We don't I mean, it's hard. It's like, Linda knows how far apart we are. So with these Zooms is awesome, you guys. I always tell everybody we're on Hollywood Squares now from long time ago. So,
Okay.
but yeah, we just need a little bit more manpower. And what you guys are doing is definitely that another what do you call it? Another shoe to put on, and that's what we need is that grief. We need to deal with resources. We need those resources, what you guys are doing. That is awesome, man. I really need and really thank the Creator for sending you guys our way with that, because that's the path we need right now. Because of what we're doing already, to put on. And I was just talking to my boss, Charlie Euro, and I was telling him how at the school, I was at the school at one time, and one of those, a girl came in there and she was crying and she was getting, I don't know if we call it bullied by the teacher, but I say it was. But and then they turn around and they go home and tell their parents, what happened. Okay, so when they go back to the school, the teacher's always going to be right? They ain't going to say, oh, I didn't do that. So what I was getting to the point was, what really mind boggled me was, our kids are going to graduate from school as being told they're lying. So then they're going to go out into the world and say, and start that what they learned at the school. So we really need to encourage that, to try to stay balanced and neutral with your kid that's having a hard time with the teacher at the school. And I asked the counselor about it. What would you guys do about this? And they just threw up their hands. But there is so much, we could work together with all this people, all our heads right now. So, but I just want to say that much, but I just want to say that prayer, cultural, and using our Mother Earth right now for help, post-prevention. Now it's going to be spring, and we I was taught to come right to the point on suicide. I don't wait around, and a lot of listening to the clients. And for COVID, when COVID was here, I couldn't run out the door, but this teletalk, this Zoom, all this, it did wonders for me. So this is a good thing. We just got to keep teaching it to our people.
All right, great.
But thank you guys for letting me say that much. But I hope I stayed on the right subject. And then what I also do is native games. I teach native games, and I go all over to all the schools, and wherever they want me to come, I go over there. So I encourage that too. So thank you guys for letting me say that much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those words with us, Hannah. Drive safe. Okay. And next slide, please.
So we have some questions for all of you that if you want to take a couple of minutes to think about and then send your responses, or if you just want to unmute yourself, we could go through each one. Actually, let me ask Deborah, what would be the best way to do this? I'm kind of
no, they can, we invite questions at this time, not just these questions, but any questions you might have of the presentation. Please unmute yourself, or else put your question in the chat box. So I think we did have some, some comments in the chat box. Let's see here. I think Carrie had talked a little bit about the school. I think you had something in there about the school. She had said she had a comment in there that the principal did not want the youth suicide showcase because she didn't want the contagion. And I think that's one of the things, one of the downloads that we have today is chapter 5 of the policy and procedure toolkit. And so I think that addresses that in there. And let's see, is there any other questions? Is that it? And again, we'd like to invite any questions right now. So Jess, I'll turn it back over to you.
Hi, Deborah. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Thanks,
Yes.
Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica C. I'm the project director for Native Connections out of Tahlequah. How do we locate the groups, other groups that may be in our area that are using this model?
So you could go to there's a Lost Team website from the founder where they track all of the different teams. I think that is not always as up to date as it could be, but I'm happy to share that contact information once I track it down. But usually they keep some track of it. And I do know that Dr. Campbell has done some work with tribal communities, but I don't know very much about it at all. So that could be helpful to see what that work has looked like.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I have a quick question for you. Do you have a different way of marketing to Native communities, Native families versus general marketing so that?
Honestly, at this point, no, because it's more of an urban Indian population. We've just basically just kept it pretty open. If you're a survivor, if you're a clinician, come with us. So very open to ideas and thoughts on that front.
Thank you.
Because I noticed on one of your other slides that, it looks like Rocky Boy is exploring the possibility of bringing this to their reservation. So I think that would be a really good follow-up to find out maybe later, how that went. We do have a Native Connections program up at Rocky Boy. And I don't think they're on here today, but maybe I could talk to the GTA and we could find out more about that. That would be pretty interesting to find out.
And we're going to be in a meeting with them, it looks like tomorrow or Thursday, to kind of figure out what the next steps are. And we're just, all we're doing is saying, like, this is how we're doing it. I want to see how they make it work in their community.
Okay. Hey, Carrie, I see you have your hand up again. There you go.
Gratitude for the services that you provide those families, like the immediate, excuse me a second. At that time of confusion, how you said you'll even go pick up the kids at the school.
Oh, we don't pick up the kids. We find a friend to pick up the kids because we don't have that kind of insurance or anything, but we find people who can make sure that that is taken care of so that the family isn't just falling apart as all of this is happening.
My point exactly. The family is falling apart, and sometimes little things like that are forgotten. So nonetheless, if you do it or whoever your friend does it, that's something that, it's human. It's very human. And I just want to
Mhm.
really say I appreciate that immediate care and service and heart and almost that tenderness that's given to people in need at that immediate time. It's tremendous. I wish that we had that here in our, so this is an inspiration of where things could go, the possibilities
Mhm.
of how to do things. And so I
Mhm.
really appreciate this webinar today. And I wish that we
Mhm.
could have more, maybe, you know, you could do it again, maybe somewhere at a conference or a grantee meeting or something. But, you know, just hearing it again, the more people that hear it, maybe the more creations of these sorts of programs. I'm going to go to the website and look for the criteria, curriculum, etc., and just see where we can go from there. Appreciate it. The whole presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. You know what
Okay.
I love about it is it gives our survivors something to do that can make real change. You know, not only are we making sure that these survivors get connected to services, but hopefully we are reducing the likelihood of losing more of our survivors by making sure they get help right off the bat. And there are no studies yet to support that, but man, I hope that's what's happening.
Mhm. Mhm. I see, Gary, thank you for uploading that guide, suicide prevention guide in the chat box. So again, you know, we did have a few things for you to download. I think they might be way at the top of the chat box, but I think we did put them in there somewhere. Yeah, tips for disaster responders, and those are some SAMHSA. We have 2 SAMHSA handouts in there, and then our postvention guide, and then the suicide prevention guide. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any other questions at this time? Before we wrap up for the day?
I did want to state, if anyone is interested, I'm happy to share any of the documents that we've put together or that others have shared with us. You know, sharing is caring. Happy to do it. Just let me know. Email me, please.
Jess, do you want to put your email in the chat box, and that way if people want to
She's got it on
reach
the
you?
next, the next slide.
Oh,
has-
is that on? Oh, it's on the next slide. Yeah,
There we
that's
go.
right. Sorry. Okay. There you go. Okay. And we will make, you know, we do have this slide set available too, you know, that we can, it'll be made available to everybody also.
I think Tony uploaded it to the chat box.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, I really want to thank our presenters today, Linda and Jess, for, you know, really taking the time to put the slideshow together and to come and explain to us what this is. And I think with Native Connections, you know, one of the things that's so cool about our, you know, this program is that every grantee has the discretion to develop their own postvention program. And this is one, you know, we're trying to provide ideas for you to show you what other, you know, what other programs have done. So I hope this has generated ideas for you, giving you some things to think about, you know, as you move forward with your plan. And again, feel free to contact Jess or Linda for more information. And hopefully we'll hear about this more in the future. You know, I think that's a good suggestion, Carrie, you know, to see where this is in maybe a year or so, you know, follow up. Because again, this is just such a really important topic that touches all of us some way, somehow. And I think, you know, I think about what Hannah, you know, I think Hannah has left already, but, you know, opening and closing in a, you know, a good way is always, you know, what we try to do. And so I'd like to invite anybody at this time, you know, to say a few closing words if they'd like to before we end this whole meeting for today. And so I'd please feel free to unmute and share a few words if you'd like to.
I just want to thank Hannah for reminding us about that culture of life. And maybe I could say a little blessing for that. We call our Mother Earth Beat Dow, Beat Dow, for giving us this life and helping us to help others that are in a situation that they're grieving and they need that help. Ijahe and Besewa, for our Creator God, for giving us this day, our Isis Biko, our Isis Nakia, our day chief, the sun, for coming up today. And I want to thank each and every one of the providers and caregivers and the listeners that are here and that are around us that are giving help in this way. And so we ask you, Creator God, to watch out and guide all of us that are doing this work and help those that are grieving and those that are sick in the hospitals and all of the things that we do that beat down. We thank our Mother Earth for giving us the medicines and the nutrients and the things that we need during this spring season, this life-giving season. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All right, everybody, I hope you all have a good day today. Do something good for yourself. Practice some self-wellness. Thank you. Okay.